Awesome, guys. So it is 9 p.m. Eastern time for me here in Boston. So it's time for us to get our class started today. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Allie. I am a doctor of physical therapy as well as a nationally certified Pilates instructor. I've been practicing here in Boston for the last 5 years. And I recently opened my own practice a few months ago and have been teaching with the Community Online Academy since it started back in March. What we have today is a traditional back pain class. We're going to be mostly movement based with some stretching and some strengthening. As we work through the class today, I want you guys to listen to your bodies and take any modifications that you feel you need. And your back is different than mine and different than your neighbors. So listen to your body. If something doesn't feel right, you can certainly take a modification at any time. And that way you get the most out of this program. So with that being said, we're gonna start back on the mat with our pillow. And I thought I lost my pillow there. It's hiding back on my mat all ready to go. And we're gonna lie down on our back. So find a comfortable position. We're actually gonna use the pillow here underneath our hips. So I'm gonna go ahead and rest down. And one distinction I wanna make is that when you put the pillow under your hips, you really want it under your hips and not so much under your low back. So I'm gonna lift my hips up, kind of wedge the pillow down. When I put it there, it should feel pretty comfortable. And we're starting class like this today as a very, very subtle, gentle way to decompress our spine. So especially for a class at night like this, that's at the end of the day, our spine is subject to compression from gravity through the top of our head down all day, and that's when we're sitting, even more so when we're sitting, and sometimes when we're standing as well. So just by elevating our hips a little bit, letting our back rest down onto the mat, we're getting some decompression through the spine here. So take a moment, and as you lie here, it should feel good for your back. Maybe it feels like a little release. You can always adjust the pillow a little bit if you need more or less support. Tune your attention into your breathing. So I like to rest my hands on the front of my rib cage so I can feel my breath inhaling, expanding out to the side, and exhaling to let it go. So by filling our abdominal cavity with air, it forces some of the muscles that are tight in our back to actually let go and relax. So you want to use the deep breathing muscles that helps activate our diaphragm to expand our breath out. And with an exhale breath, feel everything come closer together. We'll try 2 more big breaths like this. Exhaling to let it go. And one more time here. Good. So this is a little trick you can keep in mind. If you have just about 30 seconds and you don't want to exercise, you can use this little trick as a way to take some of the pressure off of your back. Now, from here, we're going to lift our hips up, take the pillow out. We're going to actually fold the pillow in half, just sort of placing it between our knees. Okay. We're going to get in. It's interesting. I had a question before we started class today about the hip flexors. We're actually going to talk about the hip flexors. So a lot of times our hip flexors can be tight, maybe painful, and overly active. So if you're not sure where your hip flexor is, it's the big tendon right on the front of your thighs. And if you lift your legs up, you'll feel that muscle activate in the crease of your hip. So go ahead and try that a couple times. March your legs so you can feel that tendon. And then I want you to keep your fingers there. All we're going to do is squeeze the pillow very gently and let it go. As you squeeze the pillow, I want to see if you can do this without using your hip flexor. And I think you might be surprised at how quickly your hip flexor can turn on to do a movement like this. And what that's telling us is that the hip flexors are maybe being a little bit too active. And our hip flexor attaches on our low back. So if it's working all the time, it may be pulling on our low back. So where you should feel this working is your inner thighs. And it's just a kind of a silly little exercise here. You're just gently squeezing in. If you're having a really hard time turning your hip flexor off, make your squeezes a little bit more gentle. And I think once you connect in with how to do it, it becomes much easier. It's really a brain exercise more than anything, but you can feel your hip flexor start to quiet down and turn off. Now we're going to use this little squeeze to actually help with our bridging exercise. So we're already set up. You're going to maintain that gentle squeeze in on your pillow and lift your hips up to the ceiling. Lower your hips back down. See if you can keep the same amount of pressure on the pillow the whole time as you lift and lower your hips. And this is an exercise for our glutes, our butt muscles. So you should feel it working, of course, a little bit in your inner thighs, but certainly through your glutes. And this is important for back pain because our glutes are what support our spine when we're bending over, and definitely when we're lifting. We'll try about 5 more here. Good. Last 4. And 3. Good, guys. Push through all 5 toes, maintain that squeeze. And last time here, drop your hips down, take a quick rest. Now, if you've been taking my classes for a couple weeks and you want to try and build on that exercise, we are going to try a single leg version with the pillow. If you are new to my class and this feels challenging already, you're going to do a second set of that double leg bridge up and down. So we'll set up here, lifting into our bridge. If you're going to try the single leg, you want to squeeze in on the pillow and see if you can lift one leg. Go ahead and place that leg down, keep squeezing in on the pillow, see if you can lift the other leg. And while you do this, you're trying not to drop one hip down towards the floor. So it's as though you could rest a level across your hips. And this sort of reveals to us maybe which side is a little bit stronger or more stable as you're moving. Try 2 more here. Excellent. And last time. Good. Drop your hips down. You can set that pillow off to the side for now. We just did a lot of nice glute work, and our glutes are actually the opposing muscle groups to our hip flexors. So the more active we can get our glutes, the less likely the hip flexors are to fire. So now we're going to lift both legs up to the ceiling. And if this feels really, really tight for you, you can bend your knees softly here. Rest your arms down onto the floor. Actually press your arms into the floor, and we're going to lower one leg down and lift it right back on up. Lower the opposite leg down and lift it back up. So this is a core exercise. Of course, I'm sure you can feel your abdominals start to work, but it is also a hip flexor exercise. And to modify, you can bend your knees and lower just part way down. So really you're only lowering your legs down as far as they can go without your shoulders or your head lifting off the mat. Good. We'll try 3 more and 2 more. And 1 more time. Bend your knees in towards your chest. Gently rock your legs from side to side. And then see if you can roll yourself right on up to a seated position. From here, we're going to flip on over to all 4s. So we'll set up with our hands right underneath our shoulders and our knees directly underneath our hips. Now, if you need padding for your knees, you can grab your pillow and put it underneath your knees here. If you have wrist sensitivity, bear with me for just a moment because we are going to shift to our forearms, but I'd like to start in this position. So we're going to do a quick cat-cow here. We're allowing our spine to round with our head dropping down and then letting our spine arch with our head lifting up. This should be in your spine's comfortable range of motion, which again is probably different than mine, probably different than your neighbors, and just work within what's good and comfortable for your body right now. And it shouldn't be painful. You're just gently creating some movement in your spine. We'll try about 3 more, and there's really not a right or wrong way to breathe with this. Just make sure you are breathing. And last time. So we're going to take this into our next strengthening exercise, and I'm just going to scoot forward a little bit here so I have some room, and we're going to lower onto our forearms. Now this is a strengthening exercise for both our hips and our core. Now intentionally, I want you to let your rib cage sag to the floor, let your back arch, and then think of pulling your ribs away from the floor. Again, let your back arch, and then try and draw your ribs away from the floor. We'll try that 1 more time here. Let your back sag and then lift up. Now I want you to keep that lifted position, reach your right leg back behind you. Chances are you shifted a lot of body weight into that left forearm. Can you push into your right forearm? Keep your right leg super straight back behind you, lift your ribs away from the floor, and now tap the floor and lift. Tap the floor and lift. So I am working my right glute muscle to lift my leg, but I'm actually working my left glute muscle as well to keep my body shifted in the center. So instead of leaning all the way to the left, I'm working to push myself back to that right side. 3 more. 2 more. Last time, bend your right knee in, take a moment, reset. You can let your ribs sag. Go ahead and lift your rib cage up. Holding that position, stretch your left leg long back behind you. Shift your body weight back into your left forearm. Keep your left leg totally straight, head is long. We lower and lift, lower down and lift. You can make this movement as big or as small as you're comfortable with, as long as your spine is still. And that's where the core work comes into play. 3 more. Last 2. Last time, gently bend that knee in and press yourself on up to a seated position. Good job, guys. So we're going to stretch out the back of the shoulders and upper back that just worked hard there. The reason being that we're focusing in, even though it's a low back class, is that those areas of tightness can actually put more stress on our lower back. So we're going to take our pillow back onto the mat and back up, still sort of staying in that all fours position. I call this like the puppy dog stretch. So you know how a dog stretches their paws in the morning? It's going to look a little bit like that. So I'm going to keep my hips lifted, but lower my forearms back down onto the mat. This time I can let my rib cage drop down, and I'm going to bring my head between my shoulders. So sit back just a little bit. And maybe you can even let your forehead rest down. If you want to deepen this stretch, you're going to bend your elbows and try and reach them to tap your back. Okay, and then you can really sit back. You might feel this stretch in your triceps. You might feel it in your mid back, your upper back. And just breathe. And if that's too much, you can always straighten out your arms or back off the amount of pressure. We'll take another big, deep breath here. And then gently come on up. Nice job. So set your pillow off to the right side of your mat. We're going to use that again in a moment, but first lie down onto our stomachs. So once you're down on your stomach, separate your feet a little bit wider than hips distance. Plant your hands flat underneath your shoulders, and we're going to work to press our spine up into extension. So maybe you're only comfortable lifting your upper back. Maybe you're more comfortable and you can actually lift all the way into your low back. So whatever works for you here is fine. Work within what's comfortable for your body, as always, making sure that there's not any pinching or crunching in your back. You should just feel a stretch. And if this is the first kind of moving and extension you've done today, it is normal for this to feel tight. This is the opposite position of how you position your spine all day when you're sitting. So it is a very effective exercise, but it can be difficult in the beginning. And I hope as you practice this a couple of times that you start to find you're a little bit more flexible. Notice if your shoulders are hiking up by your ears, try and draw your shoulders down, your chest forward, heart is tall. We'll try 3 more. Very nice. Last 2. Good. And we're going to try 1 more here. And then lower all the way down, this time rolling onto your side. So I'm going to roll onto my left side. And if you want to follow my cues, you can do the same. So I'm going to make a little pillow with my bicep, and then I'm going to grab my pillow. If you have a really flat pillow, fold it in half, but something about this height will work fine. You're going to straighten your bottom leg and bend your top leg, resting it on the pillow. And if that does not feel comfortable for your hips, fold your pillow in half. Give yourself a bigger boost. So from here, we're going to do a little stretch into rotation in our upper back. So most of us actually have quite a bit of flexibility in our lower back when it comes to rotation, but we are quite stiff in our upper back. So we're going to add to that rotation range of motion by just improving our upper back mobility. So we'll reach out in front of us and reach back behind us. So you may have done this stretch with me before. This is called book openings, but the added resting of the knee on the pillow gives us some more information. If your knee is lifting off the pillow, that means your low back is doing the stretch, which is not a bad thing, but we are trying to target the upper back. So you want to only rotate as far as you can, trying to keep your knee on the pillow. And if you have shoulder sensitivity, you can bend your elbow and practice just rotating your chest down towards the floor and then up to the ceiling. So again, we're turning, you could imagine your own rib cage almost like it's rotating up and around your spine, rotating down towards the floor and rotating up and around your spine. Good. We'll try 3 more like this. And 2 more. And the last time here. Excellent. So from here, I'm going to move that pillow out of the way and actually bend my bottom leg and straighten my top leg. So kind of the opposite posture of what we were just in. What we're working on here is the strength of the side of our hips. And the side of our hips is super important for our back too. It's what supports our back when we do unilateral tasks. So tasks where, let's say, we're only holding groceries on one side of our body. So if you were in my class last week, we practiced these, lifting and lowering. So you can practice this if you are new, but if you want to build on this movement a little bit, we're going to start to draw circles instead. So there is a lifting component, but there's also a circular component where you move the leg in front and behind you. And the reason we practice this way is our hip is a ball and socket joint. So it actually can move in circular planes, and it needs to be strong in all those planes of movement. We're going to change the direction of that circle. Now you're trying to make the movement happen just at your hip. And that means that your spine is nice and still. So you're not rocking front to back. So I like to go slow, really test your motion so you can feel those side hip muscles working to create these little circles. And they look easy, but they can get pretty tiring as you practice these. And certainly they get harder the bigger you make them. So play around with that a little bit here. We'll try 3 more and 2 more. Last time. Good. Go ahead and gently press yourself on up to the seated position. We'll come into a cross-legged position to do a transition here, sitting up nice and tall, opening the arms out to the side with a gentle side bend up and over, side to side. So just sort of letting our spine move freely before we get into that opposite side body stretch. And I have a really nice side stretch for you guys in standing today, so that's coming next. So now we'll lie down on the right side of our body. Just make sure you have your pillow handy. You're going to make a little pillow with your bicep and then use your actual pillow, straightening the bottom leg, resting your top leg down on the pillow. And it should be bent about the height of your hip. Once you are here, again, if this is uncomfortable for your top hip, which sometimes it can be, fold your pillow in half and you can give yourself a little extra boost that way. From here, top hand reaches out in front and then you reach back behind you. Now I call this book opening stretch because I like to imagine I am opening the page of a giant book and then I'm closing that same page. And again, notice for me, this side is definitely a little bit tighter. You can start to see my hip lifting off the pillow. So I need to make my range of motion a little bit smaller in order to keep my knee and my hip down so that I focus this rotation to my upper back. And it's not to say that rotation in our lower back is a bad thing. It's actually a great thing. But we want to share that rotation in our spine. We want our whole spine to be able to twist and move, not just our lower back. And that way we take away the pressure and the stress that our lower back experiences throughout our different movements. Good. We'll try about 4 more here. You guys are doing great. And last 2. And 1 more time. Very nice. So we'll get into our side hip work next. So we'll move that pillow out of the way. Go ahead and straighten your bend your bottom leg and straighten your top leg. So your bottom knee is bent about to 90 degrees. Again, you have the option to just do simple hip lifts here. You can also go ahead and try those hip circles. And you may have a difference from side to side. This also happens to be my weaker hip by a little bit. So I'm making my circles a bit smaller on this side and slowing it down so I make sure that my hips are not rocking front to back. So they stay stacked on top of one another as we draw these slow, small, and careful circles. From here, we reverse that direction, reaching forward, up and around. Can you stretch that top leg out a little bit longer? You can point your toes or flex your toes here. Either works. I find flexing my foot to help me keep my knee totally straight. Good. Challenge yourself to make those circles maybe a little bit bigger if you can here. That's it. We'll try 2 more. And last time. Very good. So we just worked hard on those side hip muscles. We'll stretch them out a little bit. So go ahead and lie onto your back. You can cross your right ankle on top of your left thigh. This already might be a stretch. If it is not, and you want to make this stretch deeper, pull your left knee in towards your chest, and you can hug behind that knee with both hands. And that should certainly intensify the stretch you feel on your right hip. Now, I challenge you guys to try and keep your tailbone on the mat. And the reason being, it's very easy to curl your tailbone up, but that creates compression in our spine. And you really don't need that compression in order to feel a stretch. In fact, if anything, you might get a deeper stretch by keeping your tailbone down. We'll hold this for 1 more big breath here. And then go ahead and switch to the other side. So now my left ankle is going on top of my right thigh. Again, this might be enough, or you can pull your right knee in towards your chest and grab the back of your right thigh here. This is our figure 4 stretch, and you should feel that on the outside of your right hip. And again, your left hip in this case. Try and get your tailbone down onto the mat. So it's almost as though you're pushing your pelvis towards your feet and leaving a small space under your low back. And that might mean you can't quite pull the leg in as close, and that's okay. You should still feel the same amount of stretch without the compression into your back. So we'll hold this for just another breath here. And then very gently press ourselves on up to a seated position. Okay. So I've had a number of questions in the past couple weeks about what some stretches for your back are that you can do in standing. So I know it's not always practical to sit down and especially to lay down. So I wanted to show you guys 2 very quick stretches you can do in standing. And you can actually do these stretches just sort of on your own, but I think the stretches are amplified and best supported when you use a wall. So if you have a wall nearby that you can stand near and that you can put your hands on, that's awesome. If you don't, that's fine. I'll give you guys just a moment to readjust if you need to. I'm gonna come up and sort of use this wall right here and just readjust my camera so you guys can see. All right. So the first stretch we're going to do is very similar to that puppy dog stretch that we did earlier. And I want to emphasize one thing. If you have very tight hamstrings, you need to bend your knees for this stretch. Otherwise, it can actually be a little bit stressful to your back. And I promise you, you're still going to get a stretch with bent knees, but I will demonstrate here. So what you'll do is place your hands kind of like your fingertips on the wall, and then you're going to walk your legs backwards, dropping your head between your shoulders. Now you can see here, if I were from the side, how my back is sort of rounded. If my legs were straight, it's going to be even more rounded. So I'm going to bend my knees and flatten my spine, letting my head hang down. So in this position, I have bent knees. I am pushing my fingertips into the wall. Maybe you can even put flat hands on the wall and just breathing in this position. And you should feel a nice stretch in the back of your legs as well as a stretch into your upper body. And you can sort of wiggle your hips from side to side to get into your side body here. And I recommend holding that just for maybe 10, 15 seconds. You can get a little bit dizzy being in that position for a long time. So then you can certainly come back and try that again. So we'll try that one more time, bringing the hands against the wall. You walk your feet backwards until you can let your head hang between your shoulders with bent knees. You can actually, if you have a lot of shoulder sensitivity here, you can bend your elbows and still think of dropping your chest down towards the floor. And it should be a little bit easier on your shoulders, but still a stretch for your back. And then very carefully, we'll come on up. So that's one of them. The second one is a stretch sideways. So to get your spine moving from side to side. So for this one, I'm gonna put my right hand on the wall and I'm standing maybe an arm's distance away from the wall. I'm gonna push my hips to the left away from my hand and dive my left arm up and over. So I'm just using the support of the wall, one for a little bit of balance, but really opening up that left side. And I like this one a lot. If you're someone who's experiencing pain that's down one side of their back or one side of your body, you wanna focus on opening up that side. So let's say in this case, I had left-sided pain. I might focus just on this side, and you don't necessarily have to do it on the right side because you are opening up that left side space here. So you can come on up. We'll take a moment's pause and try that again. Now, one thing I want to show you here is that when you bend sideways, you want it to be pure sideways motion. So notice the difference if I bend sideways like this. That's actually pretty compressive for my spine. The same as if I bend sideways and I'm backwards. So if you are feeling back pain with this a little bit, chances are you're probably a little far forward or back. Try and create just plain sideways movement. So let's try the other side here. So I'll use this wall so I can continue to see you guys. I'm gonna push my left hand into the wall and dive my right arm up and over. I'm kind of sticking my hips out to the right and reaching my right hand towards the wall where my left hand is pushing away. You can keep a soft bend in your left elbow if you need to. And if you feel back pain, draw your ribs in. So try and engage your core a little bit and just notice if you're leaning forward or you're leaning backwards. Adjust your body weight a little bit and then lower down. We'll try that one more time here, diving up and over, finding that gentle stretch. Still think about standing tall, like someone is pulling the top of your head up to the ceiling. And then you can come down and take a little rest. So we always leave a little bit of time at the end of class to talk a bit about ergonomics or talk about mechanics of back. So one of the things I wanted to touch on today was sort of the timing of these exercises. When is the most effective time to do this type of stretching for your body? And that answer is a little bit different from person to person. So I want to help you guys figure out what's the best for you. So I really kind of categorize people in two big categories. And this is a big generalization, but it's an easy way to think about when you should do this stretching. So if you're someone who goes to bed at night, they sleep all night, and you wake up in the morning and your back is really stiff. So first thing in the morning is like, oh my goodness, it's painful to get out of bed, it's stiff, it's sore, but you get moving and you feel a little bit better. You are probably someone who falls in the category more of having arthritic type pain, where you might do really, really well doing this stretching series first thing in the morning. That differs from someone who maybe they have a good night's sleep, they wake up, they feel awesome, their back's feeling good, but then they go about their day and halfway through their day, their back is sore. By the time they're making dinner, their back is really, really sore. That is sort of a different type of back pain, and it can have a number of different origins. It's probably a little bit more muscular. It may even be a little bit more disc related. For those people, this stretching routine is going to be more and more beneficial as the day goes on. So you wake up, you feel good, but keeping these stretches integrated throughout your day, maybe starting a couple of them at lunchtime and then certainly doing a few more before you go to bed, is going to be more effective. So there's really no one size fits all in terms of when to do these stretches, but I hope that gives you guys a little clearer answer on what might work for your body. And you may have a combination of the two, and honestly, there's no bad time to do these stretches. You are going to get benefit no matter what time of day you do them, but hopefully that will help to bias you more towards one or the other so you can get the best benefit. So with that being said, I'd love to answer any other questions you guys have. I know there's a few in the chat, so I'll take a moment here to just bring those up and read through them. And it looks like a couple of these are just technical questions, which is great. All right, do you guys have any other questions? Oh, this is a good one here. So any modifications for side lying if it hurts your hip? That's not abnormal. We do have a big bone on the side of our hip called the greater trochanter, and you have what's called a bursa that sits right on top of that. And the bursa sometimes is sensitive, and if it's already a little bit sensitized, it can be very uncomfortable to lay on it. I recommend, if that's the case for you, add some extra padding. And I know that's a silly answer, but the mat I have, it doesn't really look like it, but it is like a memory foam mat. It's a lot more comfortable for me than just a traditional yoga mat. So that's something you can look into. The other thing, if it's super sensitive and no mat is helping, they recommend that you kind of make a towel in the shape of a little donut and put that around the side of your hip. So the pressure is on the outsides of your hip and not just that one point right in the middle. I've actually seen people buy those gardening pads and cut a little hole and lay on top of one of those if you have a really sensitive bursa on that side. So there's certainly some options there that you can give a try. Julie, awesome question. Should we do them every day? Yes, in an ideal world, I think you should do these every day. In a more realistic world, it's most important to do these stretches on the days when you spend a lot of time sitting. So if you have a day where you're more active, maybe it's the weekend and you're out moving around, you might not need them as much. This is the type of stuff you need when you spend, let's say, more than 6 or 7 hours of your day sitting. This is important. Your spine gets stiff from that level of sitting, no matter how flexible you are. So it's important to keep your back moving on those kinds of days. So there's a couple questions in here about chest stretches and neck stretches. I do a whole separate class on upper back, neck, shoulder, and it's an awesome class. It's in the afternoon on Thursdays, and that might be a really nice one to check out next week when we don't have the Community Online Academy. Just in the interest of time, I don't get into that in this class because there's so much that we can cover that's just back pain related. So there's also a question here about recommendations for a home office chair. Actually, just last week, I went over ergonomics, and I've gone over the ergonomics of desk chair a couple of times. Very, very briefly, you're looking for 90-degree angles at your hip, your knee, your feet, and you want your low back to maintain its natural curvature. So that's going to be a little different for everyone, but if you want a more detailed discussion on that, go back and look at last week, or even, I've talked about this lots of times, there's probably a good 5 or 6 videos on there about ergonomics and work from home setup. Another question here, let me answer just one more because I know we're a little bit over time, and then we will go over the feedback app. This question here is some more tightness on the right side from driving. Are there any recommendations? So one thing I've noticed about a lot of cars, especially modern cars, is that the seat actually declines a little bit. And that really, really makes you slump. So if you can find a way to flatten out your seat for one, that will help you improve your seated posture. And there are certain cushions you can even put in your car. I like the Tush Cush to help kind of prop you up in a better position. But the second thing is, if you're getting numbness, tingling in your leg when you're driving, move your seat closer to the wheel. It can be a little uncomfortable and awkward to start that way, but having your legs stretched out and extended like that while you're pushing on the gas is probably pulling on your sciatic nerve a little bit. So if you notice more symptoms like that with driving, try bringing your seat a little bit closer so your knee can maintain a soft bend, and that should help a little bit.